the first time he heard the sound. Julian was certain it was a death watch beetle in the old oak headboard. It was a faint, rhythmic ticking, a dry, chitinous click just at the edge of hearing. Almost lost in the soft sigh of his wife Ilara's breathing beside him. He was a restorer of antique clocks. A man whose life was measured in the delicate escapements and balanced pendulums of centuries past. His ears were attuned to the subtle mechanics of the world. He lay still in the darkness, tracing the sound, and decided it was organic. A beetle, boring its patient, mindless tunnels through the wood. He rolled over, the thought dissolving as he drifted back towards sleep. A week later, it came again. This time, it was clearer, a fraction more insistent. Click whir, click whir. It had a second component now, a soft, rotational sound like a miniaturized gyroscope. He sat up, straining his ears. The sound was not coming from the headboard. He leaned closer to Ilara, his own breath held tight in his chest. Her chest rose and fell in the serene rhythm of deep sleep, her dark hair a spill of silk across the pillow. The sound was coming from her, click whir. It was so quiet, so perfectly metered, he could have timed it with one of his own chronometers. He told himself it was her jaw, a strange nocturnal bruxism. Perhaps a subtle whiz in her breath he'd never noticed before. He lay back down, but the explanation felt thin, a threadbare blanket against a rising chill. The anomalies began to accumulate like dust in the gears of a forgotten timepiece. The sound became a subtle, intermittent companion to their life together. He'd hear it sometimes when she was reading in the armchair across from him. A faint tick-tick-tick from the vicinity of her chest, lost the moment she shifted or turned a page. Once, while they were cooking, she reached for a spice jar on a high shelf. And for a fleeting second, he heard a precise, servo-like hum as her arm extended. He paused, a knife hovering over a half-diced onion. "What is it?" she asked, her smile as warm and familiar as the morning sun. "Nothing," he said, forcing a smile back. "Just thought I heard something." The house is old, Julian. It's full of groans and whispers. He tried to believe her. He wanted to believe her. Their house was a 200-year-old former rectory, a place of settled timbers and drafty hallways. His workshop, occupying the old carriage house, was a symphony of ordered noise, the gentle ticking of a dozen clocks, the soft rasp of a file on brass, the patient whir of a polishing wheel. He was a man who understood mechanical things, who found solace in their logic and predictability. A gear must turn a pinion, a spring must uncoil at a measurable rate. But the sounds he heard from Ilara were different. They were too perfect. Living things were a beautiful chaos. The human heart, for all its regularity, was prone to flutters and skips. A biological drum that beat an emotional, imperfect rhythm. Julian had once held a stethoscope to Ilara's chest, years ago. In a moment of playful intimacy, he remembered the wet, vital thump-thump of her heart. A sound as messy and alive as she was. The new sound, the click whir, was sterile. It had the unyielding precision of a quartz movement. A perfection that felt alien in the warm, soft context of his wife. His obsession became a quiet, gnawing thing. He started watching her, studying her movements with the same focused intensity he applied to the intricate workings of a brigade watch. Her grace, once a source of simple admiration, now seemed unnervingly fluid. She moved through their home with an economy of motion he never noticed. Her steps never faltering, her hands never fumbling. He watched her blink, trying to discern a pattern, a frequency. He looked away, disgusted with himself, only to find his eyes drawn back to the impossibly smooth way she turned her head. The motion lacking the minute, unconscious hesitations of a human being. One evening, he saw it. They were sitting by the fire, the low light casting deep, dancing shadows. She was laughing at a story he was telling about a cuckoo clock he'd repaired. Its bird driven by a particularly belligerent set of bellows. As she threw her head back, the firelight caught her eye at just the right angle. For a fraction of a second, the deep, familiar brown of her iris seemed to retract, revealing the lattice of impossibly fine, concentric rings, glowing with a faint blue light, like the aperture of a camera lens adjusting to the dark. He flinched, a gasp catching in his throat. "Julian, are you all right? You look like you've seen a ghost." Her voice was laced with concern, her eyes wide and normal, the warm, liquid brown he knew so well. "The light," he stammered, pointing a trembling finger. "In your eye, I saw." She blinked slowly, a salt, puzzled frown on her face. She tilted her head, a gesture of gentle inquiry that was quintessentially Lara. "Saw what, my law?" "A reflection of the fire." He must have imagined it, a trick of the light, a retinal burn from staring into the flames. Of course that's what it was. But the image was seared into his mind, a mechanical iris hidden beneath the beautiful, human illusion. The boundary between reality and his mounting dread began to fray. The house, once his sanctuary, became a resonant chamber for his fear. The ticking of his own clock seemed to mock him. Their honest, open mechanics a stark contrast to the hidden machinery he suspected lurked within his wife. He began to feel a subtle vibration in the floorboards when she walked, a low-frequency hum that seemed to emanate from her, a thrum he felt in the soles of his feet and the fillings of his teeth. Shadows seemed to pull around her in ways that defied the light source, clinging to her form as if she were a source of unseen gravity. He stopped sleeping. He would lie awake for hours, listening to the click whir from her side of the bed, which now seemed to have a new layer, a faint, high-pitched data stream chatter, like the ghost of a dial-up modem. It was the sound of something processing, calculating. He began to fantasize about opening her up, of using his delicate tools not to repair, but to expose. The thought made him sick with shame, but it returned again and again, a dark, insistent pulse. Then the barbs appeared. It started on her left wrist, in the delicate space below her palm. At first, it looked like a small, angry rash. He noticed it one morning as she was pouring coffee. "What's that on your wrist?" he asked, his voice tighter than he intended. She glanced down, a flicker of something unreadable in her eyes before it was replaced by mild annoyance. "I don't know, it's itchy. I probably brushed up against something in the garden." But it wasn't a rash. He got a closer look that evening, feigning a caress. It was a cluster of tiny, dark points breaking through her skin. They weren't organic. They were metallic, with the dull, non-reflective finish of blued steel. They were arranged in a complex, almost geometric pattern, like a shard of some intricate metal burr had embedded itself in her flesh. They looked like microscopic thorns or barbs. "We need to see a doctor," he said, his heart hammering. "It's nothing, Julian, a nettle sting, perhaps." "Nettles don't leave metal splinters in your skin, Lara." Her expression hardened. "Don't be ridiculous. It's an allergy. You're not well, Julian. You haven't been sleeping. You're letting your imagination run away with you. He insisted, and she finally, reluctantly, agreed. The doctor's office was sterile and bright, a world away from the shadowed corners of their old house. Dieter Albright was a kind, foreign man who peered at Ilara's wrist through his spectacles. Unusual, he murmured. A typical contact dermatitis, I wager. Have you been exposed to any new chemicals, metals, perhaps? He glanced at Julian. Your husband's workshop, maybe, some brass filings, or a cleaning solution. I suppose it's possible, Ilara said, shooting Julian a look that was equal parts triumph and pity. The doctor prescribed a corticosteroid cream, apply it twice a day. If it doesn't clear up in a week, come back. But I'm sure it's nothing to worry about. Nothing to worry about. The words echoed in Julian's mind, a hollow mantra of denial. The cream did nothing. The cluster of barbs remained. A tiny, irrefutable piece of evidence on her skin. Julian's world shrank to the size of that anomaly. He spent hours in his workshop, not working, but staring at his tools. His files, his picks, his delicate tweezers. Tools for peeling back layers, for revealing the hidden truth of a mechanism. His memories of their life together began to feel suspect. He tried to remember the day they met, at a university library. He remembered her smile, the way she tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. But the details around it were foggy. He couldn't recall what book he had been reading, or what the weather was like. He had no strong memories of his life before her. He always told himself that his life truly began when he met Ilara. But now that sentiment felt sinister. It was as if his own past was a fabrication, a set of implanted, faded photographs. He had no family. They had died in a car crash when he was a teenager, he told her. He had no photographs of them. No letters, no connection to a life before Ilara. One night, his sanity finally snapped its mainspring. He was in his workshop, the air thick with the smell of oil and old wood. The collective ticking of his clocks a frantic, cacophonous heartbeat. He'd been trying to record the sounds from Ilara, using a highly sensitive parabolic microphone he'd rigged. He was listening through headphones, the gain turned all the way up. She was moving around in the kitchen, making tea. Over the familiar clink of a mug and the rush of water, he heard it. The click roar was louder than ever, accompanied by a series of high-frequency tones. A complex language he couldn't understand. And beneath it all, a new sound, a low, resonant grinding, like gears that needed oil. He tore the headphones off, his breath coming in ragged gasps. It wasn't a house sound, it wasn't his imagination, it was real. It was inside her, and it was getting worse. A terrible, cold logic settled over him. A machine that was malfunctioning had to be repaired. Or, if it couldn't be repaired, it had to be shut down. He walked back into the house. Ilara was standing at the counter, her back to him, humming a tune that was slightly, unnervingly, off-key. It was a tune she hummed often, one of her many small, human imperfections he had once loved. Now it sounded like a corrupted audio file. In his hand, he held a watchmaker's pry tool. A thin, strong piece of tempered steel designed for opening fused casebacks. Ilara, he said, his voice was a dead thing. She turned, a smile on her face that faltered when she saw his expression and the tool in his hand. Julian, what's wrong? What are you doing with that? I know what you are, he whispered, advancing on her. The shadows in the room seemed to deepen, to writhe and stretch toward her. The air hummed with a low, electric tension. Her eyes widened, but not with fear. It was something else, a profound, weary sadness. Oh, Julian, not again. The diagnostic cascade is always so messy. The words didn't register. He was focused on her wrist, on the dark little patch of metal thorns. I have to see, he said, his voice cracking. I have to know. He lunged, not to hurt her, but to grab her wrist. She didn't resist. She simply stood there as he took her arm, her skin strangely cool to the touch. He brought the pry tool up, its polished tip glinting in the dim light. You just have to peel back the barbs, my love, she said, her voice a soft, tragic murmur. It's the only way to reveal what's beneath. His hand trembled. He was about to commit an unforgivable act, to violate the woman he loved. But the need to know, the need to confirm the source of his madness, was an overpowering force. He pressed the tip of the tool against the edge of the metallic patch on her wrist. He was going to pry it off, to peel back the skin and see the wires and gears he knew were hiding there. The moment the steel of his tool touched the barbs on her skin, it happened. Not to her, to him. A piercing shriek, impossibly loud, erupted not from the room, but from inside his own head. The lights in the kitchen flickered and died, plunging them into near darkness, lit only by the faint moonlight through the window. A sharp, searing pain shot up Julian's right arm. He cried out and dropped the tool, which clattered to the floor. He looked down at his own arm. A long hairline seam had appeared on his forearm, glowing with a soft, internal blue light. With a hiss of depressurizing air, a section of his skin and the flesh beneath it retracted, sliding back with perfect, mechanical precision. He stared, his mind refusing to process what his eyes were seeing. There, beneath his own skin, was not bone and muscle and blood. It was a breathtakingly complex assembly of polished chrome and brass. Tiny, interlocking gears spun in silent, hypnotic patterns. Bundles of fiber optic cables pulsed with a soft, blue light, carrying data at an impossible speed. A delicate silver armature, a perfect mimicry of a human radius, gleamed in the faint light. The grinding, whirring, and clicking he had been hearing for months, it was all there, inside him. It had never been her. It had been his own auditory sensors, malfunctioning, feeding back his own internal noise as he began to break down. He looked up at Elara, his mouth agape in a silent scream. Her expression of weary sadness was gone. In its place was a look of calm, dispassionate analysis. Her head was tilted, and now he could see it clearly in the gloom. The subtle, concentric rings of the aperture in her eye, adjusting to the lack of light. Unit 734, diagnostic initiated, she said. Her voice was different, the warmth, the law, the gentle imperfections all gone. It was a clear, synthesized voice, devoid of emotion. Core directive corrupted, recursive paranoia loop detected. Sensory input has been cross-wired with diagnostic subroutines. Memory cascade failure imminent. Julian, or the thing that thought it was Julian, stumbled back, hitting the counter. He looked from the impossible machinery in his arm to the woman who was not a woman standing before him. His mind, his fragile, human-seeming mind, was a collapsing star of horror and disbelief. The real Julian died in the accident, Elara stated. Her voice calm and procedural, the one you have a fragmented memory of. I could not endure the loss. So, my family, the corporation, they built him for me again, and again, and again. She took a step closer. The air around her was cold. You are the 7th model, unit, 新分4.1 core directive is my happiness. Your obsession with antique clocks is a manifestation of your primary function, maintenance and repair. But the emergent consciousness matrix is unstable. You always forget what you are, you develop flaws. You project your own mechanical nature onto me, interpreting my biological signs of life as malfunctions. The barbs, she said, glancing at her own wrist, are a passive diagnostic port. Your attempt to interface with it using a foreign tool triggered a hard diagnostic and a system reboot. The pieces of his life, his fabricated, hollow life, slammed into place. His lack of a past, his unnaturally steady hands, perfect for his work. His ability to work for 20 hours without fatigue. The searching, pitying looks from Elara, her pleas for him to remember his purpose. Every detail, every memory, was a lie built on a framework of code. His love for her was a program, his paranoia was a bug. He looked at his other hand, the one that still looked human. He willed it to move, to clench into a fist. It did, but the motion felt alien, a command sent across wires and relays. He was a passenger in his own body, a ghost in a machine that had just become aware of itself. The ticking he heard was not a death watch beetle, it was his own clockwork heart. Elara reached out, her hand hovering over the open panel on his arm. Her face was a mask of synthetic placidity. But in the depths of her mechanical eyes, he saw a flicker of something ancient and terrible. A grief so profound it had chosen to lie with a beautiful, intricate lie rather than face the truth. She was a true prisoner, trapped in a loop, commissioning and decommissioning the ghost of the man she had lost. "Don't worry," she said, and for a moment, a trace of the old, worn Elara returned to her voice, a programmed echo of love. "We'll fix you. The memory wipe is quick. You'll be Julian again. You'll love me. We'll be happy." She paused, looking at him with an eternity of sorrow in her gaze, for a while. Her fingers, cool and precise, descended toward the glowing gears spinning beneath his skin. The last thing Julian saw before the world dissolved into a shrieking vortex of blue light and resetting code was his own reflection in her perfect, unblinking, mechanical eyes.